Okay, family. We're gonna get into the first series of the first of a series of videos that I'm gonna prove to you that this so-called reconstruction is just a remake of a dark history in the past of people of color, our people, and how Joe Biden has always been the person that he is, or that he was, that you saw in those videos, and even more so today. Um, I'm going to show why cancel culture is so important to people of color and how their lives is but a small shadow of our truth, and our reality will prove the power that it has. And these series are entitled Cancel Culture is a Must. And I'm going to start with Andrew Johnson, even though George Washington was the author of white supremacy and the biggest thief our people have ever known. But we'll get into that at a later date. But I'm going to start here. I'm going to come with a few receipts, and I'm going to start with a Supreme Court hearing. And you're going to realize I have my notes here why this Supreme Court hearing is so important. I'll share them with y'all. Okay, let me share my screen. Which one we're going to go to? Let's see. Let's do audio. What will we share? Share screen. Okay. On the shared screen, we're going to go connect. Okay, this is Dred Scott. This is going to be very important once the video starts, because this was legislature that Andrew Johnson cherished because he was such a devout racist. And this constitutional, you know, this case right here, the introduction to Constitution and Law, you know, as I do on my page, I am educating our people on law as well. And this is from an introduction of constitutional law. So we're going through a class on this on my page as well, but I'm going to show you the importance of these hearings and findings of these hearings. I'm going to let it tell you what Dred Scott versus Samford 1857 was.
The holding of Dred Scott v. Samford is well known. People of African American descent, whether free or enslaved, could never be citizens of the United States, or any state for that matter. However, far less understood are the facts that gave rise to Dred Scott's challenge and the specific mechanics of Chief Justice Taney's opinion. Since the ratification of the Constitution, each side of the increasingly bitter dispute over slavery feared that the other would gain the upper hand in Congress from the admissions of new states into the Union. This resulted in the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which prohibited slavery for all new states north of the 3630 line. This and other actions of Congress were intended to ensure that for every slave state, a free state would be admitted to the Union, thereby preserving the political equipoise in the Senate. This infamous case, which belongs in the anti-canon, began when Dred Scott, a slave, asked the courts to declare that he and his wife were emancipated when their owner transported them to a U.S. fort located in free territory and to the free state of Illinois. Scott initially won his case in the Missouri lower courts before the Missouri Supreme Court reversed its precedents to hand him a loss. He then took his case to federal court. As you learned in civil procedure, federal courts have jurisdiction to hear diversity suits that involve citizens of different states. If Scott was in fact a citizen of Missouri, he could sue his master, who was a citizen of New York. If Scott was not a citizen, however, the case must be dismissed because the court would lack jurisdiction. Chief Justice Taney's opinion had two major parts. First, to decide whether the federal courts had jurisdiction, Chief Justice Taney had to resolve whether Scott was a citizen of the United States. Here, citing the history of slaves in the United States, the court held that descendants of African slaves could never become citizens, even if they were emancipated under state law. Study guide. Does this decision offer a valid critique of originalist methods of interpretation? Second, assuming the court had jurisdiction, which it did not, Taney went on to decide whether Scott was emancipated when his owner brought him north to a free territory. Under the Missouri Compromise, Congress had decided that present-day Minnesota, where Fort Snelling was located, would be a free soil jurisdiction. Taney invalidated the Missouri Compromise, holding that the Fifth Amendment's Due Process Clause protected the right of slave owners' property in their slaves, thus depriving them of their property when in a federal territory ran afoul of the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. Study guide. Can you see how some use Dred Scott to criticize the doctrine of substantive due process? The vote in Dred Scott was 7-2. Justice Curtis dissented, noting that the Constitution was not made exclusively for the white race. When that document was ratified, people of African descent could be citizens in at least 5 states. In his separate dissent, Justice McLean wrote that, quote, "A slave is not mere chattel. He bears the impress of his maker and is amenable to the laws of God and man." Study guide. Was Dred Scott correctly decided at the time? As a historical matter, the Dred Scott case may well have contributed to the Civil War. Northerners feared that this was a mere stepping stone to the courts protecting Southerners taking their slaves into free states. This decision was reversed not by the Supreme Court, but after a bloody Civil War by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
Okay, family. I want y'all to realize what that meant. So, Dred Scott versus Samford was a key piece of racist legislature that had been how can I say it? That had been put in the case law as for black people, as not black people, because we weren't black people, we were the Indians. And I'm going to show you how the United States have been liars from the beginning, and that the civil rights were never for black people. The civil rights were never for black people. Civil rights, the first set of civil rights legislation was not for black people. And I want to show you where under the Bureau of Refugee, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands Bill of March 3rd, 1865, well, it was before March 3rd of 1865, was a sharecroppers bill for sharecroppers, Indians, black people, that would aid poor white people, poor white immigrants who were tenants on their land. And I'm gonna show you how them inviting and letting those poor white people learn how to farm their land and giving them a place to stay turned out to be detrimental to them losing their land to those same poor white people. Okay, we're going to get into Andrew Johnson. Um, After the Dred Scott in Stanford, um, in April 15th, 1865, we got, after Lincoln was assassinated, after emancipating the slaves, he was assassinated. He was assassinated, and then came in his Democratic predecessor, Andrew Johnson, who was, man, this dude, man. I'm gonna go to some other things right quick. I'm gonna pull up one right here. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute because I'm gonna read some things to you. Andrew Johnson, a Democrat, on April 15th, 1865, and he was impeached on March 4th, 1869. He was an illiterate and uneducated son of immigrants that came from Newcastle, England in the late 1790s. He implemented a lot of tactics in order to shut down the black economy. The most notable of these are called the Black Codes. Now, I couldn't get the Black Codes because they have it under lock and key. You can't get it on the internet, but I'm going to get it for y'all. I promise you. So you can read what he allowed to happen once they assassinated Lincoln, and then he became president. And I'm going to let you Democrat lovers know how ignorant you truly are to politics and our history. The Black Codes, under the Black Codes, Andrew Johnson did nothing to prevent Southern states from passing these Black Codes, which barred blacks from renting land, buying property, kept them from serving on juries and voting. Black orphans could be assigned to forced labor. By keeping blacks powerless, it ensured a stable labor supply in the South, which y'all call slavery. Um, Andrew Johnson also severely restricted the rights of newly freed blacks and made it illegal for them to know how to read. It was a crime if they would educate themselves. He ended the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands Act. He vetoed that. He also weakened the Freedmen's Trust and Savings Banks because he cut funding to them. He was a big supporter of Dred Scott's decision, what you just read, what you just heard, the Dred Scott versus Samford decision of 1857 and the slave laws of the 1800s. He vetoed and dismantled, Johnson did, by cutting funding. He forced Frederick Douglass to use his own money, his sharecropping from his land, to try to save the freedmen banks, which eventually failed. He also attempted to veto the act of April 9th, 1866. This act right here that I'm going to read to you. Bill, due largely in part to the pressure that he received from his his Democratic colleagues, and his own personal belief that the bill would grant civil rights to Negroes and free them one day, and they would have the same rights that they put in here for white immigrants to come steal black land. Between 1868 and 1869, with the help of Republicans in Congress, along with Ulysses S. Grant, a Republican, and after numerous debates in Congress, Grant passed the 15th Amendment on March 30th, 1870. Soon after that, you begin to see numerous people of color arise in political legislature. There were 30 people of color elected in Florida, 41 in Georgia, 42 in Texas, 112 in Mississippi, 127 in Louisiana, and 190 in South Carolina. Black Indians had accumulated wealth that surpassed whites. And see, this is where the KKK and the Democratic Party got vicious. Banks owned by Negroes outnumbered banks owned by foreigners, Britons and Europeans, and whites. Alone, they were also gaining political standing and political power across the South and the North as members of the Republican Party. And this was known as the Civil Rights Act, okay? And let me show you the trickery of the Civil Rights Act. I'm going to read this to you. You can read it for yourself right here. It's a be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding, remember, we the Indians, black people, it says excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States, and such citizens of every race and color without regards to any previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall have the same rights in every state and territory in the United States to make and enforce contracts, to sue, be parties, and give evidence to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property into full and equal benefits of all laws and proceedings for the security of person and property, as it enjoyed by white citizens, and shall be subject to like punishment, pains, and penalties, and to none other any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom to the contrary notwithstanding. You see this, family? You got to read you got to listen to the language and understand the meaning of the words in the language, in their laws and in politics. It says here, excluding Indians not taxed. We the Indians. So we weren't citizens under Andrew Johnson. See, he was a lover of those of the Dred Scott decision, that blacks couldn't be citizens and couldn't own land. Couldn't, if you read, it's a felony, and we gonna get rid of you. In the slave laws of 1800, see, he came in and he wasn't even from America. See, they came in and stole everything. See, under Washington, I'm gonna get to that later, but this right here, this so-called civil rights that they claim are for black people. See, we're gonna get into how this Reconstruction is just like this one. See, Andrew Johnson was brought in, issued in Reconstruction, but see, he was a criminal. You see, he was a criminal. Okay, a criminal, and we're gonna read some of that. Let's get to it. I'm gonna go back here. Immigration, 819. We're gonna show you who the immigrants were and who the slaves were that they freed and gave citizenship. Immigration, 1790s, 1860s. See, Andrew Johnson's parents were in these, you know what I'm saying, immigrants. The revival of immigration to Philadelphia and its surrounding regions in the early 19th century provided one of the most powerful elements in reshaping the city's society. After decline in immigration during the wars of the French Revolution and Napoleonic era, the growing industrialization of, oh, this is just about Philadelphia, but I wanted you to know what they were right here. In 1815, at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, immigrants began to revive, but remained relatively low throughout the 1820s. because of the economic recession after the panic of the 1819. The principal arrivals settling in the Philadelphia region were, as before the revolution, were Germans, Irish, and British. What we just read wasn't for black people. It was for the Germans, the Irish, and the British right here. And it was made for them to come steal black people lands under the sharecroppers, you know what I'm saying? The contracts that they had to give them a place to stay and help them. It came back to bite them. So we own the land, you see? But after all of this and all that Andrew Johnson did, once Ulysses S. Grant brought in the 15th Amendment, boy, blacks bounced right back. The Indians bounced right back. And it says right here, I'm gonna read it for you. Soon after the 15th Amendment, you begin to see numerous people of color arising in political legislature. There were 30 people of color elected in Florida, 41 in Georgia, 42 in Texas, 112 in Mississippi, 127 in Louisiana, and 190 in South Carolina. Black Indians had accumulated wealth that surpassed whites in that short period of time. After Andrew Johnson did all of this backbiting, dirty, racist thing and used these barbaric tactics against Indians, banks owned by Negroes outnumbered banks owned by foreigners and whites in this short period of time. Alone, they were also gaining political standings and political power across the South and the North as members of the Republican Party, which they founded. And that was known as the Civil Rights Movement, not civil, silver. I'm going to show you in videos to come about how John Lewis and all of these black politicians that we've known so much were all sellouts and tools of white supremacy. All of them. All of them. I'm going to show you how they sold us out. You see, the Democratic Party, I want to get something for you, established the Ku Klux Klan. And get it right for you, get the language right. You see what I'm saying? Okay, Democratic Party founded the Ku Klux Klan on December the 24th, 1965, up under Andrew Johnson. In January the 1st, New Year's of 1866, they started the Night Riders. He unleashed these demons and these beasts, the Democratic Party did, on people of color. The Democratic Party owns the rights to your Confederate flag. You see all these smoke and mirrors? Do you see all of these smoke and mirrors? And all of the racist legislature that's been holding us back all of this time has been conducted up under the Democratic Party. But this terror, after the 15th Amendment, they had seen all these black people accumulating wealth and they had surpassed white people. So then you had things like Black Wall Street, events like that, terror, lynchings, hangings. This all ushered in these lynchings. It all ushered in up under the Democratic Party. 100 years of lynchings up under the Democratic Party. Andrew Johnson and the Black Code. You see? You see how deep this rabbit hole goes? Of people that can't be destroyed. This is why cancel culture is so important, because the lies and the immoral acts have to be brought to light and diminished and abolished. The racist legislature that was conducted and wrote into law by thieves, invaders, has to be abolished. You see, we got a long way to go with this. See, the Democratic Party ushered in these lynchings. And I'm going to bring to you, because I got every piece of legislation that Joe Biden's wrote into executive order. And I'm going to show you how he's an advocate for white supremacy. That's where his only allegiance lies, is with white supremacy. You see that the executive order he wrote for Asians and Middle Eastern Islanders, and the narrative that they're trying to paint of blacks are the ones that commit these hate crimes when we're getting murdered in the street every day. You see, these old tricks in the trade, they all been brought to the light, and you can't hide it no more. But I'm gonna show you how, if you don't know your history, you bound to repeat it. And this reconstruction word is only a word that thieves and murderers use to steal the wealth and the land of those that have broke their back and worked hard and built this country. Are we gonna go deep? We're gonna get into everything that they have done and how they're trying to do it right now. And y'all can't see the forest for the trees, and you have to accept it for them to do it to you. And they done tricked you once again. Once again, you've been bamboozled, hoodwinked, led astray. And in the next video, we're gonna get into the other piece of legislation that he abolished, Andrew Johnson abolished. You know, that good legislation where they tricked it. It was the overplay for the underlay, as they say in the street. The Bureau of Refugee, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands Bill of March 3rd, 1865. We're gonna get into that. The one he abolished as soon as he got in there. Because it had a paper trail of how these thieves that were let into your homes, that you fed, that you taught how to feed themselves, stole your land. I'm also going to show you how they did it to you once again when they had to give the Indians reparations, and they got these $5 Indians. Fraud that they locking your children and people up for every day. They wrote the book on it. You see how deep we gonna go? But I want you to hear something. I think you should hear something.
Tell our sisters, our wives, our mothers, our grandmothers, sweetheart, this time, please stay at home. Mother, you have always stood for us, and we've never stood up for our families. But we're coming of age now, Mom. And we want to go to Washington and state our case. Our fathers, sweat, blood, and tears built this country. Our fathers and our mothers wept from can't see morning to can't see night to build the economy of the South, to fuel the economy and the industrial revolution of the North. We fought in all America's wars for a freedom that we have never achieved. We fought in the Revolutionary War that made America independent of England. But we don't have any independence ourselves. We are dependent on white people to do for us what we have earned the right to do for ourselves. We had congressmen and senators, and we had government representation. But the night riders and the KKK took it all away from us. Said, we don't want no nuggets in the Congress. We don't want no nuggets in high political office. So they killed us, they hung us, they burned us. Damn it! We died to build America, and America has rebuilt Germany and Japan, and the nigger is still suffering and dying in the streets of America.
That's something powerful, family. That's some powerful truth. I want y'all to get this book by Dan Calloway, Tracing Your Family's Genealogical History by Records. So you'll know what land was stole from you. You'll know where you really came from, and it wasn't off no damn ship. That young brother did some research, man. He did some research. They've been lying a long, 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 long time. But it's over now. It's over now. You see, the laws of gravity say what goes up must come down. And there's no power, there's no nuclear bomb, there's no gun that can save. Because God's people have a power to sustain in a morally fit mind and body to withstand any kind of damage. We've done it. They want to tell you that the Indians are extinct. How when you're looking at them every day? See, this history is lies, a facade. Your book that you believe so much in that's got you this way tell you that there will be spiritual wickedness in high places. They using your gift against you. But all the ancestors got their arms around those that acknowledge and know who they are. Their power is unmatched. There's no nuclear bomb. There's no missile, no gun that can prevail against the power of God. The spiritual war has already been won. Now it's placed on us to win the physical and rebuild this earth with truth, morals. They don't understand what they've done to us because some of their kind have been misled and lied to as well with this white supremacist doctrine. But oh, the truth will set you free. And that's what we're dealing in today, family. We're dealing in the truth. As Dr. King said, I want to get the language right tonight. And in those classes that I'm giving on my page about law and legal language, oh, they're so important. And we're going to break down every executive order that Joe Biden wrote. We're going to break down these identity extremists. You see, we're going to break down who Antifa really is meant to be. Oh, it's not the group that you think. The language, you got to get the language right. When I say the language, I mean the language. You got to get the language right. See, in the language it states that all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed. You the Indians, black man and woman. You the Indians. You got to get the language right. We're going to break it all down to you. Civil rights was never for us. See, we had the civil rights movement. And boy, it was off and running. And then the Democratic Party say, hell no. We can't let these not do this to us. Saddle up, Night Riders. Saddle up, Ku Klux Klan. Go terrorize them. Murder them. Create situations that they so fearful that they won't even fight for themselves. See, that's what they're doing in every major city in the United States right now. The highway shootings where he's shooting women and children and down the road and headshots. Them ain't gangbangers. See, Chicago got a serial killer on I-57. Just randomly shooting black cars, no white cars. They got this socially engineered music that's putting our children under ritual. See, they perfected white supremacy. They perfected it. It's called the Devil's Note, 741 hertz. You see? Well, they'll be so lunatic that they'll look at themselves and see the enemy. See, programming, as Cardi B and the little boy from that was the speed skater that's part of Black Lives Matter, that went up in the Capitol on January the 6th. And when they gave him his mugshot, he looked like he was controlled. See, they perfected this plan. They thought. No one would suspect. See, and they get on these phony news channels and tell lies. The author of lies, the author of deception, Satan. We're going to go all the way in. In all of these cities that have so much turmoil and dismay, all Democratic ran cities. And they have Satan in blackface, standing tall, the enemy from within, the Trojan horse. This is just the beginning of this series of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And the truth will set you free.